As we live on this place called planet Earth, there are difficult times that come into our lives, times of death, times of sorrow, sickness, sometimes economic downturns, and they bring great challenges to our lives. I've been through such a period myself, a period of grief and sorrow at the loss of my wife, Shirley Ann, and that happened on August the 18th at 4:05 a.m., 2020. And during this season of grieving and this season of sorrow, and quite frankly, this season of anger, when I have not understood why this had to happen and I have not been able to come to grips with it, I've suffered through these months, and it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult. I don't mind telling you that. And I've grieved publicly. I'm not going to cover it up. It hurts. It hurts deep. It hurts daily. I cry often. In the holidays, I was down south visiting my relatives. I had a couple of days in the hotel alone. And so I just really cried out to God. And I said, you have to help me. I can't live another year like I've lived this past year and a half. I just can't do it. I must somehow come to grips with this. I will never get over it, but I must get through it somehow. And in the quietness of my soul, God spoke these words to me. And he said, you have lived with a siege mentality during this period of time. And I did not create you to live with a siege mentality. I created you to live with a seize mentality. I'd never heard those words put together like that before. And I sat in that hotel room with tears streaming down my face, trying to come to grips with life and what life has dished out to me, the deepest grief and the deepest sorrow and the deepest pain I've ever had to walk through. Not really a will to live, not a wish to die. I didn't have a death wish, but I just didn't have a life wish. And I tried to grasp the meaning of this, and being the person of the Word that I believe I am, I always have to look at the Word of God and say, where is this in the Word of God? So I went to Philippians chapter 3 and verse 12, and Paul said, I have not yet apprehended that for which I was apprehended of by God. And I thought the word apprehended there was kind of wow, that's a pretty big word. What's he really saying? But the original word is seize. And so Paul was saying, I have not yet seized that for which Christ seized me. And then I thought about the siege, and the siege of Israel, Samaria, actually, in 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 7. And the king of Israel is walking up on the top of the wall around the city, and he's so concerned because there is a famine in the land declared by the prophet Elisha, and food is scarce, and animals are dying, and people are dying, and a woman comes to him and is going to eat her own child, and he's about to pull his hair out. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have an answer. And he says to the woman, who am I that I should judge? I mean, why are you coming to me? Why don't you inquire of God? He was not a godly man. He was not a godly king. And Elisha had issued the edict of the famine that would come. And so the city was under siege. It was under siege. It was under siege by a famine. It was under siege by a lack of any kind of resources to sustain life. And the Syrian army was outside. And they could not do anything about it. And there were some lepers outside the city, and they looked at the situation. The city's under siege. There's no food. There's no water. If we sit here, we die. If we get up and go to the camp of the Syrians, we may die, but we're just going to risk it. So they got up and they went toward the camp of the Syrians, the Syrian army. And as they approached, God caused their footsteps to be thunderous. And the Syrian army thought that the king of Israel had allied with some other countries and was mounting up an offensive against them. And so they ran and they deserted everything. Huge camp. All kinds of provisions, gold, silver. And so the lepers came in, found that the Syrians were not there, and just loaded themselves up and went back, and then felt guilty. We must tell the king. And so they sent word inside to tell the king. And of course, the king sent some people out. And in all this time, Elisha had prophesied, and he said, tomorrow food is going to be plentiful. And Of course, there was the king, and there was his right arm, his right-hand man, and his right-hand man said, "That's not true. That can't be so." And Elisha said, "It is so, but you won't eat of it. You won't partake of it." And sure enough, the next day he died. He didn't partake of it. But there was more than enough food. The city was no longer under siege. I tell you that story because I want all of you to hear me. We've lived under siege in this nation for the last 2 years. The siege of a virus, the siege of government taking away our freedoms, the siege of such unrest in this nation and hatred like we've never seen before. Never before in the history of this nation have we had people at each other's throats just because they belong to different political parties. I really never knew who my neighbors voted for. That's just the way we lived for all these years. And you know what? I want my life back. I really do. And I think you want your life back. And it's about time that we rose up and said, you know what? We're not going to live under siege. We're going to live with a seize mentality. We're going to take back that which was stolen from us. We're going to rise up. We're not going to live like this. We're going to get our lives back. I want that for you more than I can even express in words. I want you to be able to live 2022 with a seize mentality. I hope you'll come and visit us at the church where there is an amazing move of God underway. I can't describe it for you. We decided to have 21 days of prayer and fasting as we always do at the beginning of the year, and we decided to pray on Wednesday nights as we always do. And suddenly God showed up, and the crowds have grown every single week. It's just amazing that the presence of God is so powerful and so strong. You must get here. And do not miss this. And so much so is God moving that we can't stop the Wednesday night. So we'll continue right on, 6 p.m. on Wednesday nights. Come and join us. See what God is doing in the midst of a people who've decided no more siege mentality. We will now have a seize mentality.